Welcome back, my friends, to the Wild Hunt Philadelphia tournament. We are going to go into the second half of round one. As players get eliminated, things will start to progress through the rounds much more quickly, the Swiss format. We're going to have markthius taking on heatcmf for this next feature match. Joe?
Yeah, this is great. We just get to see more and more Gwent, right? We got 2 matches on round 1, and let's go see what our analysts have to say about this matchup.
Flake and Swim.
Nice to have you guys. Thank you so much. We are ready to roll for the next featured matchup. This one is going to be with markthius. Some of you definitely know who markthius is, the bringer of the sax sounds, the smooth jazz of markthius is going to be here. And he's coming up against Heat. This is markthius from Florida, and Heat is all the way from New York.
Yeah, markthius was the one who put together some of the amazing trailers we have here today. And his opponent, Heat, I'm actually looking forward to seeing play. One of my favorite things about these tournaments, especially these open LAN ones specifically, is that we're going to see a lot of kind of unknown players, and we're going to see them doing very well. This is a fantastic opportunity for these kind of more unknown players to really, really prove themselves and make a name for themselves.
Absolutely. So the first round is under wraps. We're ready to see what round 2 brings, and we're going to kick it over right to markthius and Heat.
All right, we're going to get that game started in just a second. If you're enjoying the music that we're listening to on the breaks here, we have it's Game Chops, DJ Cutman. Really good stuff. I'm really enjoying it myself. And we're going to get things started here. We have the deck list in front of us here. We're going to see a lot of varied stuff. I said this at the top of the show. You know, because it's an open tournament, there's a lot of players at varying skill levels. We have some of the best players. We have some people that are kind of local as well, some local heroes. And who is going to come out on top, we don't know yet. But we definitely don't expect to see the same decks over and over again. You're going to see a lot of variation here in the deck list here. We're going to wait until we get the game started up and queued up before we see what's going on here. But we see some stuff here. Yeah, we see some stuff. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
And we've got the game. And Dagon makes its first appearance at the Wild Hunt stream, my personal favorite leader. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see how this one plays out.
It looks like it's going to be Bear Skellige with Olaf looking in the head here. We're going to see this from the POV of heatcmf, who is actually a console player. Being able to take part in this tournament is pretty big for him. He is playing on a special account that we have here for those coming in from console that are able to finally participate in the tournament. So another great shining point of this open tournament. markthius coming in here with what looks like is going to be a Death Wish-based Dagon, but with some interesting picks here. We see the Giant Toad and Manticore combo, which is something that monsters have been developing over time.
Yeah, it's not seeing quite as much play as it has been, although I still think it is powerful. One of the interesting dynamics here is it looks like both players actually are sporting a very large gold finisher to end the game in the Siri Nova and the Olaf here. So I do not think that round 3 power is going to be in short supply.
Absolutely not. Just making sure that we have the right list in front of us here. So this is, yeah, it's the brand list. Gotcha. Okay, so this is on markthius' side. So yeah, the Nova list here. And no Nova. Yeah, this is Olaf is going to be taking up the back end here of round 3 probably for heatcmf as an Arcus board developed here from markthius. So we have Larry jumping around the board here. We have the engine developed. One of the things I love so much about the Death Wish variant of monsters right now is that it's got a little bit of engine, it's got a little bit of control, and it's got a little bit of tempo kind of all mixed in together in a beautiful kind of synergistic symphony. It is also one of my favorite decks at the moment, Joe.
Yeah, the deck it gets a lot of its power from its flexibility. As you were saying, it sort of has the tools to handle any given situation. It's got a little bit of carryover. It's great in the long round, great in the short down. The overall flexibility of the deck is very high.
Yeah, whereas when you look at Bear Skellige, it's much more of a strong tempo deck. It's going to utilize Resurrects in round 3. It's going to be playing huge things like Bear Masters and Berserkers. And of course, you got your power plays in Resurrection, and finally the huge bomb in Olaf. So strong tempo versus a nice kind of hybrid blend from Dagon's Death Wish. And the great thing about Death Wish is that it's only kind of rising in popularity now, but as far as like design-wise, like the way all the units work together, it is one of the best kind of designed deck archetypes right now as far as, this synergy, the bronze core that just all works together. You can have so many different starting hands that all can kind of play out a game in a similar fashion and kind of get you ahead in the same way.
Yeah, it's certainly a very sweet archetype. As we see here, the Skellige players starting to develop their bears, get everything down, and one of the interesting dynamics here, as Larry the Arcaspore dances around, starts pinging some units over here, we're going to see that is going to grow the Berserker Marauders coming from heatcmf here.
It's true, yeah. It's going to be working against markthius a little bit. He was able to, so we do know that he's running Foglets as well in this Nova list, so we see Foglets, Barbagazi, Drowners, Cyclops, as well as Griffin would likely be part of this as well. Yeah, the Griffin is such a strong play. And finally, the Dow, the Earth Elemental, of course, kind of rounding out the bronze core for markthius. So also running Osrail. Osrail has got such a great reputation for me lately, not just because the Osrail could eat Cyclops, or in this situation, the Manticore, but also since spies are no longer doomed as they have the one use, they do end up in the graveyard. So Osrail usually has a tasty snack for that 18-point play. It's just a really strong card right now. Also, being able to hate on Skellige's graveyard on top of that as well is huge. No Caretaker, and opting to go with Woodland Spirit instead for the last gold card that we can't see.
Yeah, it looks like he'll be relying on the Osrail for handling the graveyard, and as you said, it has gotten a giant boost in strength with the addition of the spies now staying in the graveyard. One of the interesting dynamics here, Skellige, particularly Brandless, are mostly known for their carryover, and it looks like heatcmf has come ultra prepared to win the carryover wars, sporting a Ceres in his list, not something that we see all of the time in the Skellige list. That's also going to mitigate the strength of something like Barbagazi coming from markthius.
Looks like heatcmf is going to go ahead and actually boost up one of these bears, so making sure that he has a very large resurrect target for his future clan protectors, but of course giving a great snack for Osrail. So it's possible that markthius can put a little bit of graveyard hate, a little bit of punishment on that as well, choosing to invest that heal and kind of spend that Bone Talisman, possibly early here, but the Berserker Marauders aren't getting a lot of value here. Olaf is not nearly ready enough. He's not in a great position to play Udalric, and of course the Freyas and Sigurd Rifa, that's for round 3, so Heat might get pushed out of this round.
Yeah, I think markthius certainly has the stronger hand as far as round 1 goes. And if he...
Ooh, interesting.
This is a very early Osrail coming down from markthius. He's taking a very aggressive line here, jamming the points, potentially taking away... Oh, he's taking away the Olgierd. That's what it hit.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. We actually can't see in the graveyard right now, but we do know that Heat is running Ceres. So that was Ceres and Olgierd in the graveyard. Now, of course, Morkvarg was the last brand target. So this definitely hurts the long game of Heat, taking that away. I think that, Joe, what do you think? Do you think that Osrail being held back here for a larger unit that maybe could affect the resurrection targets later would have been a better chance for markthius, or do you think denying Olgierd early is ultimately going to be in his best interest?
I think denying the Olgierd is actually very important here because of the Barbagazi in his hand. If he didn't have the Barbagazi, I think that the play is a little bit more questionable. With the Barbagazi, now just fighting against the Morkvarg, there's a large chance that he'll actually be able to win the carryover war, potentially enabling a dry pass type of strategy for him.
Exactly, yeah, because the Barbagazi will be more than Morkvarg, but it wouldn't have been more than Morkvarg and Olgierd, and Ceres, depending on the resurrects that would have been triggered at that point.
He's also going to have to work a lot harder to try and see that Ceres multiple times now, because the Olgierd won't be bouncing back from the graveyard.
Heat's going to go ahead and throw that spy. Markthius is going to make the pass, and Heat's just going to go ahead and let that go, because there really just weren't very many plays left there. So Heat either had to pass on, had to pass behind or pass on even. So while neither situation is great, Heat at least was able to end the round here, maybe get a little bit more value out of his cards here. As he puts one of the Marauders away, he's going to grab that Heim. So now we have seen all the gold cards. The last one would be Ceres, of course, in the graveyard. Markthius does have Gels and Woodland Spirit still available to him in his deck, and I think markthius is in a great position here to maybe even out-tempo this here. He could really put a lot of points on the board here. Of course, developing that Frightener is the first step of this.
Yeah, I think the Frightener is the key card here.
But then dropping Toad, perhaps, I mean, the Dow and Griffin combo would be something that he'd really want here. I think really be able to push here.
I think we're going to know a lot about his plan here within the first couple of plays. Basically, if the Larry the Arc Spore comes down early in the round, I think that means he's looking to play a longer round 2 and sort of bleed his opponent. Whereas if he saves it, I expect to see a longer round 3.
Heat going ahead, and now did he apply the buff on Morkvarg there?
Yes, it looks like
so he didn't choose to resurrect the bear. So that's 2 Bone Talismans out without the resurrections here. It looks like Markthius is going to go ahead and bleed a little bit. I think this is actually a pretty good read here from Markthius. I think that Heat was maybe showing his hand a little bit, how bound he was by the cards in his hand for round 1. I think Markthius could be getting a good read here and might actually go for a long round here, develop an engine, get a lot of tempo out here. The Cyclops is able to do that. Barbagazi could at least enable Is he running Slizzard? Actually, that I need to check. He is not, actually. Instead, he is running the
He has Reconnaissance, sort of playing a very similar role to that card, right?
It is very similar, and I think that Reconnaissance in any Nova list is pretty strong because you are able to thin your deck without any sort of reliance on your graveyard. You do give up a few points, but you are still able to get cards out, and there's the Dow. So now the Cyclops is much stronger, Barbagazzi much stronger. Giant Toad also is very good with the Manticore, so markthius might be able to just tempo out a lot of points here, force Heat to go down a card, which is exactly what markthius wants for that Nova finisher.
Yeah, getting the Dow online is one of the crucial key points for any Death Wish matchup, although we do see markthius' hand is notably lacking Griffin. So all of the sort of triggers he has to get the powerful Death Wish ability of the Dow are going to require removing it from the board. So I think he would like to have some Griffins in his hand, but he does have multiple carryover pieces that he can sort of develop to make himself have a very, very strong short round 3.
Yeah, it's true. The Griffin does get that kind of extra charge out of the Dow, while the Cyclops and the Barbagazzi can also proc it. Cyclops just making it's just a great 18-point removal play. Truly, truly one of my favorite plays at the moment here, just because I was actually going to say this actually. Just putting markthius on maybe having a Griffin just really denies so much potential value for markthius. It also puts Heat in a position where he's not going to get too out-tempoed at this point. But there is the Giant Toad draw, so there is. It looks like markthius is considering it here.
Yeah, I think he's going to take a swing and try and hit another Dow here. You saw a little smile on markthius' face. He's like, you got me. It was my only Dow. As a lot of the rest of the Death Wish deck is reliant on having one of those on the table. Ooh,
the Foglet draw is disgusting. That's not going to help markthius at all. So markthius has his mulligan cut out for him, and it looks like his bleed roll is now probably not going to be strong enough.
Yeah, I would expect to see a couple more cards. I think the Barbagazzi is coming down this round for sure. For markthius' side, potentially the Monster's Nest, depending on if he wants to save that for something like a Ghoul in round 3. But I expect to see 1 to 2 carryover cards and pass reasonably soon from his side.
Now markthius can maybe concede the fact that he's simply not going to get ahead here. He is up a card. He can play this as long as he wants. He could actually just play the Foglet. He doesn't have to win this round, so he can just continue to bleed cards out of Heat's hand and just kind of rely on Brewis, Siri Nova, and maybe some other power play with the Cyclops for a short round 3.
Yeah, it's a lot of strength he has there, and like we said, he is in sort of this commanding position. He not only has strong tempo plays for a short round 3, but he has the ability to develop some carryover, and he is up a card here. This is sort of a Gwent player's dream. This is everything you want if you're markthius.
Yeah, it's just the ultimate bleed roll. There's a Rot Fiend is going to come out here, which is triggerable by the Cyclops, making it. He does have the 18-point removal play with the extra point on the Rot Fiend to do some extra removal. So a lot of potential here to actually do some more damage here as Heat's plays are still very strong. Each play definitely giving him a nice foothold on the lead here.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even though markthius is sort of in the bleed role here, he does sort of have to keep up appearances at least, as if he cares about this round. If he gets way too far behind in tempo, we could see something like a hero pass coming out of Heat, just assuming that his opponent can't make up the point gap. So markthius has to be mindful of this going forward as he bleeds his opponent.
Keep up appearances, another good one. I love that, Joe. That's really good. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you still you don't want to make it look like you have too much weakness, and playing the Foglet, of course, you don't want to play the Foglet late if you're going to play it. I mean, I think markthius is likely going to mulligan it because all the other cards are good. I mean, the Barbagazzi late is probably. I think that you may want to hold the Cyclops. If you're playing one more card only, Barbagazzi is the card. Mulligan the Foglet, hold the Cyclops. That's how I think you probably want to do it. Rot Fiend is going to blow up there for an extra 8 points there. Yeah, it's going to keep it close enough. He's going to maybe still have to invest some high tempo just out of the threat of falling behind.
And we also see the Coral on board, so he's fairly certain that the Barbagazzi in a row by itself is safe. He knows that there's not even the threat of something like a Renew on a Coral potentially coming. He's playing around Igni by leaving it in its own row. So that Barbagazzi is pretty close to guaranteed, as the Skellige deck isn't exactly known for its ability to remove units from the other side of the board past Coral.
This is good. Heat, markthius got a huge play out of Heat here with the Hyman to Skell to Berserker Marauder. That's the kind of thing you don't want to get you late in the game. So seeing that now is very good. Now markthius is probably making the decision here. You could play the Foglet here. Heat would definitely still have to play.
Yeah, it's interesting. It depends on how he views his mulligan for next round, whether he's looking for something specific or not. I do believe, okay, and it looks like he's going to save to mulligan the Foglet. Now, do we have 2 Larry the Arc Spores in the graveyard? Because we do know that his Dow got artifact compressed by the Coral. So do we actually have 2 targets for the Brewis there?
There are, because there was one in round 1 and there was one in round 2 as well.
Okay.
So Brewis now creates an engine around 1. We're going to see the mulligan of the Foglet. We're going to see what markthius picked up. He's picked up a Drowner and Griffin. Very nice.
Yeah.
So actually, you would go ahead and, well, he can't resurrect the Dow because the Dow was compressed.
Yes,
so
the Dow was
that Griffin
compressed.
is going to be able to at least proc an Arcaspore, so it's not dead. It's going to be a 13-point play. Not the worst thing in the world. Griffin just has so many applications in this deck. You can shut it down, but making a Griffin totally dead is pretty tough with Brewis in this game.
Yeah, it's really hard to totally blank the Griffin. Obviously, Larry the Arcspore is not your preferred target as the Dow. It's just a lot more points. Specifically, when you're looking at something like a 2-strength Morkvarg, a 1-strength Beastmaster, or 1-strength Freya on the board, so he might actually only wind up getting 1 to 2 points out of the Deathwish trigger. That being said, I think he's far enough ahead here that it's not hugely concerning for him.
He's got a great hand, but honestly, markthius has a really, really good hand as well. I mean, being able to get both Arcaspores out here jumping around, even though it's going to make a Berserker Marauder a little bit better, it's not going to be, like, he's got to play Siglas. He's got the 14-strength Bear that's in there still. He's got Olaf, he's got Sigurdrifa, which is going to be a huge play. I think markthius with that Styria Nova, 22 points represented in that last card, he's going to have to develop a huge, huge advantage, and the game's already really close down a card here.
Yeah, he's actually behind 2 cards,
Two cards.
here because he had to make the first play into the round.
Yeah.
He was only down to 1 card in raw economy, but yeah, it is not looking great from Heat's position here, and I think you can see that on his face a little bit. He doesn't look super pleased about his position.
Yeah, I think that this is just going to be a kind of a card advantage problem here. There goes the Griffin, not blanked. 13 points for the Griffin there. He did actually tagged the larger Bear there. I don't think it makes too much of a difference. The extra wounded units, of course, just make the Berserker Marauder better and better, but there's just not enough time. There's not enough time in this round for it to be that much better. Sigurdrifa may be looking at Skjal here if there's still a target for it.
If there's still a Berserker Marauder in the deck, I fully expect
There's only
that's
2
where it's
cards
gonna
left
go.
in the deck, so I don't think so. I think one of those is, actually, I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
Not really
it's
sure.
interesting here. I don't think there's enough raw points coming. Okay, it looks like there is going to be 1 more target.
I mean,
for
we
it
did
left.
see 2 options for
Yes.
and Saris as well. I mean, it's a
So
pretty
that's a big
huge
tempo
play
play there
huge
with the
play.
Saris coming out, right?
Yeah, the double res, right? The Skjal also pulling out the Marauder. That is pretty good. That is pretty good. So there was an extra Marauder. For some reason, I thought that he had... oh, because he mulliganed 1 away. That is
Yes,
correct. He did have
yes.
2 in his hand at one point.
So we just see it's a raw point game here. There's not a lot of interaction that's going to be coming from Heat here. He's just going to have to slam down his Olaf, which I believe is fully powered at this point. He's played quite the amount of Bears, and he's just going to have to hope it's good enough.
I mean, the Cyclops is going to knock out an Arcaspore likely to get that, and that'd probably be the last play. markthius would want to play Styria Nova first, and then the Cyclops for that extra point, the extra 4 points on the Deathwish, and that will be enough. markthius is going to be able to take this first round here against Heat. This is the second half of round 1 here.
Yeah, it looks like markthius taking game 1 here off to an impressive start, sporting Dagon. Dagon's undefeated in the tournament so far, just saying, guys.
Heat just kind of got stuck behind there on the cards. He played his spy early, got a quick pass, and then had to pass on even. Not the best possibility. Larry Love there from markthius. He's going to go up 1 here. Now match point here. Dagon has 1. Dagon is going to be retired from markthius lineup. Heat is going to have to decide what he wants to take into the next matchup. Stick with Cursed Skellige, or perhaps pick one of the other things that he has here, John Calvert, Alchemy, or Full Test, Temeria, which is not a huge deck, not like a 40 card deck or anything like that, but is got the nice Temerian package in it. So we're going to see. We also don't know what the ban was, so
Yes.
we will see basically what the ban was. Whereas markthius does have the option of bringing in Axeman, Herald the Cripple, or Viper Alchemy of his own.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what the players bring here, and particularly for Heat, does he go back to the Skellige deck? It looks like he chooses to go right back to it. He's got faith in this deck, and let's see how it pans out here.
Decent hand. All of his gold. Obviously, you don't want Saris in your hand, but of course, as far
It's
as
an easy kick.
it's an easy kick, of course. Does have Skjal, which is a huge power play. Does have Restore, which is a huge power play.
Yeah, there's a lot of power cards in his
Yeah,
hand.
it's a lot of power right here. As markthius is sporting a nice alchemy deck there. Stefan Skellen represented as well. It looks pretty standard, I would say. The Seer being able to jam up strategy perhaps with the graveyard, of course, or make some better use out of some of the cards as well for Markthius doubling up.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if Markthius is going to hold on to the Cantorell, and it looks like he is, so that's going to be a standard Silver Spy play rather than coming off of the Rainfarn. We can see in his list that he also has Joachim as a potential Rainfarn target for a large amount of points, and he may be saving that as a finisher.
Heat stuck going first once again here in this matchup. Not good when you're on when you're up against the wall here already, as this is a best of 3 as we're going through this. Just an update as well. No Ability has defeated Locke and Gwen. Shoe Plays has defeated Big Mo Alice. Pumpkin Advanced, we talked about that earlier. I think those are the only other matches that have gone through.
I think Vishra finished up as well, defeating Kochua 2-1.
Vishra got his victory as well. He'll be moving on with a win to the next round. I mean, all of these players are moving on. You're not out with one loss, that's for sure, because this is a 6-round Swiss. So I believe it's only when you lose 2 games that you have the potential here.
There will actually be 2 players if the numbers hold up, making the top 8 at 4-2.
Okay.
The way the numbers pan out, it's looking like we're going to have 1 6-0 player, sort of the king of Swiss, 5 5-1s, and 2 players with the best tiebreakers, usually 4-2 players that take their losses later in the tournament.
Right on. And I know that as we approach 3 losses, there will be some eliminations at that point in the Swiss, so these rounds will start to move a little bit faster. But first round, maybe second round as well, we're going to have 2 feature matches, as this is the second feature match of the first round. As this gets on here, the Bears touching down, and Markthius looking for some Viper plays already. Thanks very much, Mega Mogwai, for the huge host. I hope you had a great stream, my friend, and I hope everybody is here to enjoy this tournament here. If you're just tuning in, we are live from Philadelphia. This is the North American LAN that we have been waiting for quite some time. We are just getting started. This is the second feature match of the first round of a 6-round Swiss. Best of 3. Markthius now up 1 point. We saw earlier, always Turtle defeat Grey Boxer. 2-1, which is a great matchup as well. And lots of great stuff happening on Gwent for Gwent right now as we're getting started off with some first looks into Arena. But this is a great tournament. Lots of varied matches here as Bear Skellige is taking on Markthius' Alchemy Nilfgaard.
Yeah, for the new viewers, we'd just like to say we have a ton of Gwent left to play for the day. Welcome to the stream, and once again, thank you, Mogwai. It looks like it's an interesting decision over here. The Slave Driver's getting quite a bit of value from Markthius' side. He's not necessarily developing any synergy, but he is just slamming a lot of points on the table, hitting Beastmasters with each of them.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how this is a we talked about how Dagon was a nice hybrid of kind of control engine and tempo, whereas now we have Markthius with a stronger control deck and Alchemy Nilfgaard, one of the strongest control decks out there right now. Really kind of dictates what's available and what's actually able to rise in power. Where on the other side you have Bear Skellige here, which is one of the strongest tempo decks that exist now. The dwarves have fallen from grace.
Yeah, so the Viper Witchers aren't going to be exactly at their best in this type of matchup because there's no sort of engine pieces to remove. You referred to this as a tempo deck, and quite correctly, it's going to be a game of raw points in many ways. So I'm curious to see how Markthius wants to path out the rest of this game here. On the red coin, he is in control, basically, of how long this round's going to go for the majority, so I'm curious what lines he's going to take.
A lot of great players joining us. There's a pit of players right now. Lots of games going on. 24 separate brackets as we're just getting started here. Only players have won or lost 1 game at this point. And we'll be moving into round 2 shortly after this. As Heat drops his second Berserker Marauder, he's going to create a... Now, Heat has a much better hand to stay in a round than he did in the first game that he played this, where he was stuck with a lot of Resurrects, Udalric, Olaf, which wasn't able to be played, Coral, which couldn't really find a target, and of course Protectors, which are also Resurrects that weren't able to really source anything from the graveyard. Plus, he got his Olgierd snacked on by Ozrel, so he's in maybe a little bit better position to fight for this one.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you bring that up. That's sort of what I was going to talk about as well. We saw the very aggressive line of snacking on the Olgierd in round 1 from Markthius before. Do you think he's going to use the Asir maybe to do something similar to sort of handle that carryover and put the just put that card, the Olgierd, right back into his opponent's deck?
I mean, I think ultimately that play for it was more about the round 1, I think, pushing Heat out with tempo, because I don't think ultimately he was able to get Ceres out in round 3, and the game wasn't so close that Olgierd would have made the difference. So while it was a fine play, I think Markthius actually probably could have benefited more from playing Ozrel a little bit later. Asir putting Olgierd back in the deck, I think, is still a good play. I mean, it's one of the only things that he can probably use to disrupt, but I think maybe he wants to wait until maybe round 2 or round 3, so he can tuck in, while you maybe miss your chance to tuck in Olgierd, you might be able to tuck in something a little bit stronger. But I mean, there's a lot of ways to source cards for Heat, so maybe them being in the deck isn't necessarily a big problem, as Heat's been able to thin his deck really well. Only had one card, I believe, left in his deck at the end of the game, the last game that was just played.
Yeah, and it looked like he agreed with you using the Mandrake on the Roach. That sort of is a tell that he was planning, at least, on putting that back in the deck to get a free 10-point silver coming out when he plays a gold later in the game. And Heat CMF is just having none of it. He's seen this Roach before. It's quite the big horse, and he's just going to turn it into a little artifact.
I mean, risky play here by markthius, not applying the Mandrake to Calvet, which is traditionally what's becoming more and more popular to combat things like, Coral being able to target non-golds and stuff like Osrael being able to just eat Roach out of the graveyard, or anything that can graveyard hate really can't hit that leader. So Calvet is often the safest place to put that Mandrake. markthius went ahead and put it on Roach. The old Roach Mandrake is kind of the pioneered, with Vesemir, kind of that pioneered use for Mandrake, but has later been applied to leaders. Which is great with Kahir being able to bring Calvet back, but it's probably because Kahir not in markthius' hand made him not want to take that gamble.
Yeah, it was a very interesting choice there. And now it looks like he's got a small lead on even cards. I'm curious how much deeper he really wants to go into this round. I don't expect to see the Rainfarn into Joachim come out. Now, I think with the Roach getting turned into an artifact by the Coral on the board, that's going to increase markthius' need for some sort of finisher type card, because that is going to take some power away from his typical finisher plays. Yeah, so what is that's coming down here?
That's going to be a Seer, and there it is.
The
Olgierd is tucked back in here. We can't get a look at the graveyard, so I'm not sure if I recall exactly what was tucked back into the deck, but it might have been the Mahakam Ale. I think that might have been just another, so there's a little bit more to pull for novices later on. This is also a really good matchup, I think, for markthius. Even though Control doesn't necessarily excel against Tempo, being able to use Slave Driver and get those Bear Masters is pretty nice.
It's really powerful for him here. Yeah, it's certainly putting a lot of points on his board. In the last round, markthius did see all 4 of Heat's golds, correct? So he doesn't have to fear something like an Igni, as we see the double 11s in the front row with no fear there.
I believe that's correct. I believe that is correct. I mean, we did see, yes. Maybe Coral might have been. I'm not sure about Coral, but you can at least put them on Coral.
Yeah, I think Coral's a pretty standard include here. So how do you think he's going to try and take advantage of this point gap? Do you see maybe a round 1 spy coming down to sort of force his opponent into a passing situation? Or do you think he's going to hit that runestone, crack it open, see what's inside, and push deeper?
Well, you can counter spy right here. I think that this is, I mean, you can take it one or the other. I think you can, markthius might be able to pass. He is going to go for the pass on even cards, because
I like it.
Last time he did not, he played the spy without any sort of follow-up, and I think markthius kind of sees that as well, especially because he played the Clan Protector for the boost on Morkvarg. And unfortunately, Heat has to go into the same situation that he was in the previous game. markthius also has Spy. So once again, markthius is just going to be in a prime bleed role here, but is bleeding exactly what Alchemy wants to do. It made a lot of sense before with Dagon. But it's, is it what he wants to do in this situation?
I think so. I think that bleeding is reasonably fine here. You just have to take your card. He's in such a great position. I think that Heat was really hoping his opponent, markthius, would sort of fall for the trick, fall for the ruse, and play another card after that spy there. And markthius was just having none of it, showing off some very good decision-making there, knowing that there was no way his opponent was making up that 27-point gap in a single card and just snapping off the pass.
Looked like Olgierd did not actually go back into the deck, as he did come out of the graveyard, so something else went back into the deck.
That is interesting.
I thought I saw the orange glow of Olgierd, but I guess I missed it.
As well.
It happened very fast.
So not quite sure. Maybe he was trying to restrict his opponent's targets for something like Priestesses, something like Restore. Potentially, if your opponent's overloaded on these, as we see, we have a very resurrection-heavy hand here by Heat CMF. If there's not enough targets in the graveyard, some of these cards can actually wind up being dead, and then they're quite the liability to have in that position.
The markthius is now probably just deciding how he wants to bleed here, if he wants to bleed at all. And I think because, I mean, the Viper Witchers, I mean, we can do some quick counting here. I don't know if we've seen the Viper Witchers touch down yet, so we don't know where they max out. We can maybe take a quick look, take a look at that here, as Heat is now just trying to stay ahead so he doesn't get stuck in a position where, he's kind of getting bled. He's always going to be going down a card here. It doesn't look good for Heat just from a position standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, markthius just having the ability to be up an entire card and holding on to some potentially really, really powerful finishers here. We see Trial of the Grasses in his hand. As we mentioned earlier, that Rainfarn has a Joachim, which is just going to represent a ton of points. I believe there should be a here in the list as well that he has the potential to find. I'm really liking markthius' spot.
I think the Viper Witchers come in at the 10 ping, making them a 15-point play maxed out, and they will max out because there's going to be so many greater than 10 units, like the bears that we see at 11 here.
Yeah, I think 10 is a pretty crucial number to hit, particularly with so much greatswords in the meta. It's a deck you could reasonably expect to see in the tournament. And when Crack happens to pull a greatsword, it goes to 10 strength. So I think that's sort of the magic number you're looking to hit with your alchemy decks.
Yeah, I mean, you can raise it even higher than that. Maybe even you run more than 25 cards. Perhaps you want to instantly counter a spy that you're going to be playing, get them up to 13. Sometimes I've seen some swallow potions out there. There's a lot of alchemy options to really boost those Viper Witchers to obscene value that we've seen. But, 10 is great. I mean, 15-point bronze is usually very good, especially if, even if you have nothing to control. And there's the pass from markthius. So even cards here, Heat had a nice lead. Spy was able to be played. And now we're going to go into match point here for markthius. He's up 1-0 here in the second half of the first round here of our 6-round Swiss.
That certainly says that he thinks that his deck favors a slightly longer round because he really did have full control there. He had seen Uruk come down. He was in total control of how long that round was going to go. So markthius is putting himself in the position that he believes to give himself the strongest chance to win. It's interesting here that being up the card generally matters more on fewer cards, as it's a larger percentage of the total cards played in the round. So I'm curious to see how his decision pans out here.
I think he has a really good hand, but once again, stuck with the situation of going down 2 cards in this round. markthius holding Trial of the Grasses, so we know that basically counters Olaf, maxed out at least, unless there really doesn't seem any removal option here for Heat to take any of the Witchers off the board. So I think that from a raw point standpoint, markthius seems to be in a highly advantageous position, not just because he has cards that can combat the high tempo of Heat, but also the fact that he has the card advantage.
Yeah, I mean, the card advantage is sort of just everything here, right? He's going to have targets for those Viper Witchers. We're really just looking to see what's inside that Runestone. I think one of Heat's best chances here is potentially if that Runestone doesn't find any value. I don't think he has ways to remove the Witchers from the board, as Skellig is not really known for that. So the Trial of the Grasses is going to be effective here. It's also a card that's sort of fallen out of favor in a lot of the alchemy decks, so it might come as a surprise to him.
And this is so good. You can actually see how this matchup really works here. The Slave Driver being able to hit Freyas and already having Bear Masters in the graveyard from round 1. markthius is able to play these Slave Drivers for 14 points. Slave Driver into Freya into resurrecting the Bear Master. It hurts. It hurts to have your own strategy used against you like that.
And it's not even just the points. The alchemy deck is so good at taking advantage of all the extra bodies with things like the Mahakam El. So every single part of that card is being used in a very relevant way here. Don't let any of the buffalo go to waste.
Exactly, yeah. Enjoy the offal. Is that what you call it there? The remains? Definitely nothing goes to waste here. And I think that's one of the reasons why Slave Drivers feel very frustrating to play against, because you're going to see a lot of Slave Drivers. You're going to be able to pick and choose from what you get to use from your opponent's deck, and you can actually apply the synergy in the same way that your opponent might, and you get the extra points from the Slave Driver, plus you get to bring the Slave Driver back, create a whole bunch of extra bodies in your graveyard. You can even use those resurrects, just like your opponent would kind of rely on those in round 3. It's a tough spot, even though Heat is ahead on points right now. markthius is in a commanding position.
Yeah, that's the thing. The points are not showing the whole story here. And once again, Heat's sort of in this position where he just has a bunch of points to slam down on the board, but being down that card is very problematic here. The saving grace for Heat here might be that there's not a Kahir in markthius' hand, so that Calvate won't be making a return appearance. He's sort of just working with the tools he has.
The first round of the Swiss is coming to a close. We are seeing a lot of scores come in. You can follow along right now at challenge.com/NSG_wildhunt_Swiss. If you want to see where everybody stands right now, a lot of scores to also, you can type bracket in chat as a command. Exclamation point bracket, I believe. Yeah, that's an easier way to do it. We can do it that way as well. Follow along. You can see where everybody's standing as we are getting through the first round here. Find out who's actually going up in a position of maybe taking that 6-0 King of the Wild Hunt in the Swiss.
Yeah, it's half the players are going to be off to a very good start, and the other half the players are still in it, definitely live for top 8. They're going to be doing their best to make up for the round 1 loss. I'm interested to see who's going to come out on top here. This is one of markthius' big power plays into the Joachim. Let's see what he pulls off of it.
He's going to get a novice, which is pretty good. 12 plus 12, not too bad.
Looks good to me.
Yeah. He's definitely keeping up here and then showing, those witchers, each 15 points, easy points for them to pick up on those 2 bears. Finally, a novice pulling out perhaps an ointment for another slave driver, or even an ointment for a bear master. It would be able to res it. On top of the fact that it could just be another ale. Finally, the Trial of the Grass is going to touch down for 20. It's looking pretty good for markthius here in this round of the Swiss.
Yeah, he's sort of slowly closing the gap of points, and he's just catching up a little bit every turn. And sitting on that extra card, I think it's going to wind up being the difference here. I wouldn't count Heat out yet, but I don't think he's in a favorable position at this point.
I mean, Saris is already out here. He does have the Berserker Marauders that are able to get pretty big amounts of points here, but I mean, ultimately, the double Viper Witchers, each representing, it's 30 points in total for the Viper Witchers and another 20 for the Trial of the Grasses. It's a big, hefty hand right now from markthius, and then that extra Vicovaro novice for Garnish, which is probably already going to be good enough.
Yeah, I think good enough is a good way to put it. What do you think markthius is thinking about? At this point, when you're so far, or you feel so far ahead, he's probably thinking about ways to lose, right? What are the potential cards that he might want to consider playing around in this position?
I mean, I don't really think when you have this many points that are just relying on your opponent's board state, and you know that, I think maybe he's holding back on the Witchers just in case there's some way to answer them.
Something he
Even
missed
though
maybe,
he
right?
has 2 here, I think that you still have no reason to not be patient here. The points are on the board for your taking for the Witchers. I think that you're not really playing around so much as you're just kind of just waiting to see what your opponent has. He can anticipate Olaf, anticipating another Berserker Marauder if you're anticipating as many points as possible. I don't think Sigurdrifa came into Heat's hand, but Sigurdrifa would probably be like the biggest play that would happen. Sig into Skull into Berserker Marauder, but that's not even Heat's arsenal at this point. So markthius has a big smile on his face, being able to play.
Another slave driver coming down for a priestess. That is feeling good for one of the 2 players at the table.
Yeah. You can see it. You can see it in the body language of both players. One's enjoying this a little bit more than the other, I think.
I think slave driver has that impact on a lot of games. One player's having a little bit more fun than the other.
Now we're going to see the Viper Witchers start cutting things up here, and we're going to see this this point gap swing here. 20 more points. We'll put this at a total of 106. Undisturbed, of course, but there's going to be a lot of disturbing going on.
Yes, there's going to be quite a bit of
the
disturbing.
disturbing strength of Viper Witchers touching down here.
I mean, he is down 23 points here. So from a mathematical standpoint, the Viper Witchers do make that up, and they're looking at Trial versus Olaf.
Oh, he actually lost a point there. I wonder why.
Interesting choice.
He's trying to maybe lower the potential point of another Berserker Marauder. I wonder. It'd be too bad if it kind of came down to a point here. markthius is going to play this out. So he's going to go ahead and get full value, unless I miscounted his deck list, but I do.
Yeah,
oh, it is 9. I apologize.
This
I counted 10. I must have counted Trial of the Grasses twice or something like that. But
this is an NA tournament. Math is hard.
Math is hard. NA math. markthius is going to take it 2-0 over Heat. Had to go first in both of those games. markthius was able to pull it out with Alchemy and Dagon taking out Bear, kind of cursed Bear, Skellige from Heat. Heat, a console player, being able to join us in this tournament, which is great, of course, having console players being part of this great open tournament here in Philadelphia. Thanks so much for joining us, as markthius is